Hello, good afternoon. Hello, this is Natasha Harrison, President and CEO with Community Build Ventures. And I send you greetings from sunny Atlanta and really excited for today's conversation. Before I dive in with our guest, Jen, who's also here with me, Jen Wilsey. Hello, Jen. I'm so excited for this conversation. We are broadcasting live from sunny Atlanta, Georgia. And again, I'm president and CEO of Community Build Ventures. We are committed to developing powerful, impactful, and racial equity driven leaders and organizations that serve Black communities. And this is our New Way to Thrive Facebook Live series that we actually kicked off last Monday. And our intention is to bring resources, conversations, reflection points every Monday at noon here on our page, Community Build Ventures on Facebook. So just continue to stay tuned for different topics as we, think about ways that we can have conversations about racial equity and also centering on healing and emotional self-care practices. So today's topic is about the Black card and white allyship. And the topic is actually derived from an experience Jen and I had during one of our Community Build Ventures consultant network meetings. So Jen is one of our new members of our consultant network, and we have been committed to doing quarterly meetings. And so our topic is really derived from an experience that we had in our last quarterly meeting back in March. And I thought this would be a great topic because it brought so much up for me and for Jen. Without further ado, I want to introduce Jen, who I've known now for a year. And one of the things how I've experienced Jen that I want to say, I didn't tell her that I was going to say this, so it might come as a surprise. But really, it's honestly in one of our exchanges on that experience back in May is that Jen is very warm and inviting. I find her to be someone who is open, who comes with empathy, who leads with empathy and wanting not only just improve herself, but challenge others in their practice together so that we can, really create a beloved community. I really see her embodying that. And I think my first experiences with Jen, I actually saw her facilitate conversations about race and how important your stories are important in this conversation about race, white supremacy, being anti-racist in the work. And she is a beam of light. So I just want to put that out there that I continue to enjoy our interactions and just being around Jen. She's just one of those people that you just want to be around. And I also want to introduce her from her quotes from her actual website that I found that I was just like, yeah, that's Jen. So from her website, how she describes her work this is a quote directly from her website that really resonated and that I definitely agree that she's really leading from this. So she says, my racial justice work is motivated by love for humanity and the belief that white people can and must transform ourselves if we are to make productive contributions to dismantling white supremacy and building a future in which people of all races can thrive. I believe that we must simultaneously transform institutions and structures while we transform our own beliefs and behaviors. So without further ado, hi, Jen.
Saying that it's an honor to be getting to know Natasha and be invited to this conversation. And then that I was wondering how many folks have seen the show The Affair, because in that show, they film the same situation from 2 or 3 different people's perspectives, and you get to see how different people experience the very same events, but remember them or feel them very differently, right? So I think that's like the experience that we had. So I was invited to a Community Build Ventures consultant meeting, or I've been invited to join them quarterly. So at the last meeting, and actually the one before that too, I was the only white person present. So all the other folks,
yes, you were at the retreat. Yes,
I was at the retreat. Yeah, so both times I was the only white person, and I was very aware of that and intentional about how I'm showing up, but also so honored to be invited in. So at this last meeting, we were sitting around the table, and some folks were joined by Zoom. It was all Black women and me. And so, Natasha, you made a comment. We were starting the meeting. We sat down with our salads, and you started the meeting, and you say, "Oh, this is an all Black female space." And then I kind of went like, "Wait a minute." And then I think Neith said, "But Jen's here," or something like that.
Right.
And then I literally didn't hear what you said next because I went into like a nervous place in my mind about, oh, maybe they don't want me here.
Oh.
But, yeah. But what was it that you said in that moment?
I said, oh, Jen has a Black card.
Well, first of all, I didn't hear you say that, but I didn't even know what a Black card was. So what happened was, so I'll tell a little bit more, and then I think you should tell your version of the story. So basically, Natasha made that comment, and then a series of other comments were made. And I think Falami said something like, just don't go taking that Black card everywhere you go, right? And I heard that. I thought you said Black heart, because literally I didn't know what a Black card was, and I didn't know what was happening, and I felt really self-conscious.
Sure.
So anyway, the meeting went on, and I made a mental note. I said, okay, I need to ask Falami what she said. Did she say Black heart? Did she say Black card? What did she say, and what just happened? And I also in my mind thought, okay, recenter myself, because I know sometimes if I get really nervous in a situation like that, then I lose my sense of myself. I can't be present. And so I just had to recenter myself, note that I didn't know what just happened, and note that it made me feel self-conscious and nervous, and question whether I was wanted in the space. And so the meeting went on. I didn't get a chance to ask Falami what she said because she left too fast. And then I was meeting with my friend Matisse, who was also at that meeting, who I've known longer than you, and we work together a lot. So we're in pretty deep relationship. Matisse and I were meeting the next week, and she said she brought it up. I didn't. She brought it up. She said, "Jen, do you know what happened at that meeting?" And so then she gave her take on it. And I realized that I had missed so much of what had happened and what was going on in those moments. And it caused me to reach out to you, because I then knew what Matisse thought had happened, but I didn't really know what you said or why. And I wanted to check it out with you and see how you experienced that meeting and what actually happened, since I couldn't hear it.
Right. And you sent I thought was a beautiful letter. And honestly, I have never received from a white person trying to unpack their experience in a Black space. So I want to just lift that up, that's an experience that I've never had, where a white person really reached out to me and said, well, this is what I experienced from my point of view. Could you unpack that for me? And then also just your experience being in the space. You also shared kind of how it was being in a space with Black folks. So if you could just kind of share that as well. Because you kind of did some overall kind of reflection. Then you said, well, I didn't understand this Black card thing.
Yeah, right. Right, because the other thing that was happening in that meeting, which I reflected back to you in the email, was, well, yeah, I haven't been invited into very many all Black spaces in my life. And actually, most of the Black spaces I've been invited into have been later in my life. You know, the more anti-racism work I do, the more I'm getting invited into spaces that center Black folks, that are Black cultural spaces. Anyway, so I had this light bulb moment in the meeting, because all of you were talking about, you were all talking about projects you were involved in or wanted to do that really just had to do with loving and caring for other Black people. And it was like this visceral experience I had in my body, because I've been a consultant for a long time, and I've been in a lot of majority consultant majority white consultant spaces, also multiracial spaces, but I had never experienced, there was something about the feeling in that room, several things about it that just felt different to me. And it made me realize what Ruby Sales and James Baldwin have said when they've talked about white people just need to learn how to love each other. And I sort of knew what they meant, but I thought, what is that? You know, what does that really mean? I asked myself, what does that mean? White people need to love each other. Well, that meeting gave me a little more insight into it, because I don't see white consultants sitting around a table, you know, tapping into our care for the well-being of each other, and a care for how white supremacy is a sickness, right, that white people are perpetuating. And if we learn how to love each other, I think we actually would do a better job of, we would not be caught in the delusions of white supremacy so much. So I guess what I felt in that meeting was I got a little more insight into how Black folks care for each other, and I realized how much that's missing in white spaces, and how sometimes in white conversations we can be so abstract about the work we're trying to do, but we're not really centered in bettering ourselves and our communities. I don't know if that's making sense. It's hard to explain.
Okay, Jen, for some reason you blacked out. Uh-oh. All right.
I'm back.
Yeah, I got you back.
Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. So yeah, so thank you for that. I think so. Now if we're doing a playbook from the show Affair, right? So I'll share kind of what was happening in the meeting from my perspective. So again, I did say, oh wow, it's a Black female centered space. I said something to that effect. And then of course, Neith, we both agree, Neith did say, oh, but Jen's here. I was like, oh, well, Jen gets a Black card, right? I said that, I think, and then, or even Neith said it, and I chimed in and kind of co-signed with her, kind of from that piece. And so when you sent that email to me, I responded back really of explaining from my perspective as a Black person what the Black card means to me, which was a really great exercise for me. So one of the things that I wanted to lift up is, for me, the Black card is a term of endearment to non-Black people. So it is. So for me in my work, I have always code switched. I grew up in all Black neighborhood, all Black schools. When I would go away every summer with my family, my mother's side of the family is from a small town in Tennessee, Newport, Tennessee. That's honestly the times where I really got to interact more with white people. And it was never a positive interaction, honestly, in regards to that. So it was always in my mind, and also hearing the stories of my Black family talk about their interactions with white people, and just the state of Black people in our interactions, right? White supremacy with white people. And so for me, it was very clear, right? There's not knowing if this white person or these groups of white people that I may be interacting with is for the rise or demise of my people or me. So, and so have always been guarded, because you don't know. And it's an intuition. Honestly, I think a lot of Black people feel of understanding the traumatic experience, because there is no post. So if I am giving you a Black card, what I'm saying is that I have an ability to have a transformational relationship with you who is not from my race. Like, I feel like, again, as I said at the opening of this, like, I feel like there's an openness for you to learn from me, and for me to learn from you. And honestly, that is mostly non-existent with a lot of the white people that I engage with. Because for whatever reason of having this even us having this honest conversation is a very new thing for me. And I feel relaxed and I feel safe. That's an important thing because, again, this fright, flight, or freeze intuition that Black people have, for a lot of us, that is a constant state of being. And so that's why code switching is an important tool for us. And code switching, again, I'm bringing up a term people may not know, is that I may not bring my full self in a non-Black environment because I'm really just kind of surveying of can I be my full self in this space? Will there be retribution? Will there be an attack? Will there be something that happens to me negatively if I'm my full self in this non-Black space? So I would say with you, and that's probably why, not saying again that you are passing for Black. I want to make that clear. That's probably because I felt safe in that space. That's probably why, honestly, it was not a negative to you that I forgot that you were there. It was because I felt safe with you. And that is that's a huge compliment, because I know that I am guarded in white spaces. I am learning now to be my full self. You take it or leave it. Well, one is because I work independently has really been helpful in that I don't have to conform to a culture that puts me in a position where I can't be myself. So I want to say big ups to you because that is definitely reflected in who you are and the work that you try to do every day, right? This is your life's work. And I appreciate that. So I just want to lift that up. So that's what it was. And I appreciated your response back in your email, of like, oh, wow, oh, that's cool. And then this should be a Facebook Live of us talking about it, right?
Yeah. And I want to pause and just repeat again back what I heard you say, which is that you don't feel relaxed or safe. Most of the time when white folks are around.
Sure, I don't.
And I just need to, so as a white person, I really need to breathe and hear that. And hold that, because I think it's something that I could know intellectually, but I feel like I'm learning to feel that more in my body and to really take that seriously. What does that mean? So I don't want to be contributing to spaces where Black folks do not feel safe or relaxed. And I have to, as a white woman in the South, I have to, be aware of that legacy, because I have to know that any space I'm walking into, that's the context I'm walking into, is a context and a legacy of white women, right? As well as white men, but there are particulars about white women, how we contribute to spaces where Black women do not feel safe or relaxed.
Yeah. And I will say that I have done a lot of work around that of being who I am authentically, and honestly being the woman my mother raised me to be. And so how can I be that person? So that's always as for me as a reflection point when I'm entering spaces. And then, saying, okay, I don't have to engage either. You know what I mean? I don't have to engage, and I can back out of the space. I have a choice in this at any moment of engaging or not. So just want to lift that up. And so I think, and I appreciate you, Jen, before our call, like when you did your outreach, of some key questions for us to kind of think about and reflect on. So one of them is, what can it look like for white folks to be present in spaces that are created by and for Black folks and that center Black folks? So it was really important hear from your perspective on what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? Well, I think, I mean, that's my question. And that's what some of what I learned from that experience is, I think it looks like, I mean, it's not possible, first of all, for white folks to be participating in spaces that are by, for, and centering Black folks if the white, like, I need to be aware of the history and the legacies upon which my experience is informed. I need to be aware of my whiteness. I need to be aware of the space I'm taking up, and I need to be my full self. So I need to be my full self, but I also need to, I need to care about and prioritize the well-being and the joy of Black women and Black communities as much as I'm prioritizing my own well-being. And I think that white people have a really hard time doing that. And often we don't realize the ways in which we're not doing that. But the well-being of Black folks has to be a priority to me. And I have to know that my whiteness is it's going to affect every single interaction that I'm a part of.
Right.
And so Black folks of color are not automatically going to trust me. I have to, I have to show up as my full self, as a humble person who's aware of the way, not just how racism exists out there in the world, like in terms of statistics, but I have to own the fact that white supremacy lives inside my body and inside my mind. And no matter how many years I do this work of unlearning it, it's still going to come up, and I just have to build the skill to notice it and to work with it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Stacy actually lifted it up. Hello, Stacy. She lifted up the word trust is so paramount, right? And so, and then, you know, white supremacy lives inside your body, right? In your mind. And it's a constant cycle. So it also lives inside my mind and body, right? Yeah. All of us. It's inside. And so being conscious of that and being reflective of that. And I want to lift up in that space, even in your anxiety about the Black card of like, oh, okay, what is this? What's happening? Am I not on it? What's going on? You stayed in the space and stayed engaged in the space, right? And so just even that around, okay, white supremacy lives in my body. I'm conscious of this. And then this experience, you still had anxiety, right? And not knowing, but you stay engaged in the space. So if you could talk a little bit about the practice, right? Like what, you know, the reflection, the practice that you do to stay engaged and to really think about how you're centering on Black people's well-being, you know, and also creating trust. So what are those practices?
Yeah, well, so I guess, yeah, like I already said, you know, it's much more than just acknowledging I have white privilege. It's really doing the work. It's, you know, I work with my therapist on how I relate to my body and to my feelings, and how I build relationships with people that involve sharing power rather than dominating or controlling other people. Like this stuff goes to the very core of our beings. But also in a moment like that, you know, I've had other Black women who are close to me point out, oh, well, I noticed you shrank in that moment or that interaction. And so I'm really paying attention to, and I've had to learn this because I did this work for many years without having these skills, but I'm building the skills of pausing. Like in a moment like that, I got so anxious that I couldn't hear, but I paused and I noticed, oh, wait a minute, I'm going into my anxious mind. I have no idea what's going on right now. I'm not actually going to I have to recenter myself before I can participate again, because if I participate from that anxious place, I'm not contributing well to a space. So it's noticing what's happening in my thoughts, in my feelings, in my body. And it's getting curious about what happened. And it's not being afraid to reach out and ask what happened. But I think there's a way in which I could have reached out to you to ask what happened that could have been problematic. But there was something about the way I reached out to you that you said you had never had a white person reach out to you that way before. I know that when I have had awkward moments in the past with people of color, I've been too scared to bring it back up. Then. And that's, I'm not anymore, but it's also because our relationship has some substance to it, even though we don't know each other really well yet. We've spent the time we have been together talking about, personal and also like personal stuff and also social justice issues. And so I'm just, I'm wondering, I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, because we actually connected through purpose and vision, right? So how we connected, and even one of the things we did at our network retreat was that we centered. It was important for me and for everyone else to really be invested in the vision and purpose of each person, of the gifts they are bringing into the world. And as a group, as a network group, we've called out emotional self-care and healing as integral strategic points and clarity for us as a group together. So I think me even remembering what you said in terms of your purpose and what your vision is for the world and how you are bringing forth your gifts, because we started from that point versus kind of a shallow end. Really, I mean, it was like boom, we dove in. I'm wondering what it would look like if our interactions with each other centered on, so what is your purpose today? Centering on what people are asking, just honestly, in African tradition, in a lot of languages, it's not how are you doing, how is the community and how is the children, right? We center on that. And then that conversation is much more deeper of just like, what our role is in that, what we should be doing. And that's a humanity question versus, so what do you do? Right? People normally ask in starting a conversation. I think that's coming up for me of like, wow, if you centered on conversation. So, what is your purpose? What is your vision? How can I, and also how can I support you in your vision?
Right.
What does that look like? I think that would create some awesome, really relationship building conversations versus, kind of the network style, which is a norm that I don't really jive well with. Anyway. So yeah, thank you for that. And I think also I love the pauses. I put that as a reflection point of just the pause. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to pause and of just what I said that I'm not comfortable a lot of times, but I'm doing my own practices of breathing and sharing my truth, regardless of how I think that white person is powerful or not. In that space, because we all know, like in a space, we all know who has the power at that point, and people are kind of waiting on that person to speak in their ideas. So really, really have worked through that in terms of reflection points of just, what is the truth that I need to say right now? And I want to also say that I have had 2 life coaches that have helped me, and therapy works wonders. A lot of therapy. And I would say my most recent one, my sister, Neat Sankofa, who's listening in right now, has really helped me on what truth I need to say and what energy that I want to connect with, and be intentional about, here is the energy that I want to connect with, that I want to bring forth, so that I am spending most of my time doing that connection with that energy of like-minded people, hence why you've come into my life, versus people that are not. Like, what do you want to attract is really this law of attraction. What do you want to attract? And really vision and write it down what that is. It has been very helpful too, for me as a practice, so that I can, just speak my truth and be who I am, and it's okay, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess one of the other things that I want us to think about, I guess, is the particular challenges and possibilities for this in the South, because we are in the South.
Yep.
And kind of what your thoughts are on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy. Well, you know, I'm not from the South originally. I've been here for 5 years. I grew up in the North, in Rochester, New York. And, but I guess, you know, what I've witnessed since I've been here is such a deep resistance from white folks, to really reckoning with, our past here in the South. And sure, like those of us who are alive right now, only are alive right now. And I think we just have to be more real we have to stop being so nice and be more real about the legacies that we've inherited and the violent system of white supremacy that white people who, you know, came here before me built. But then also the ways that system continues to live today throughout our institutions and systems, and relationships. So even in our interpersonal relationships, I feel like, I mean, I know that it can be really hard to see, you know, how the decisions I'm making every day, how they relate to racism and white supremacy. So I've been working with some white folks who are leaders here in Atlanta to really show up more fully as leaders for racial equity. And what does that mean? It means being more vulnerable. It means acknowledging, you know, our whiteness. It means showing up for Black women. It means really taking ownership and responsibility for disrupting the patterns of violence, of exclusion, of control, of dominance from the past.
Yep. And you know, it's so funny, this whole so I call it nicety. So born and raised in Atlanta. My mother is from a small town, Newport, Tennessee. I visited every summer until I was 14. So I got kind of a rural and kind of an urban perspective of the South. And I call, and again, I'm born and raised in Atlanta. I love some aspects of Atlanta, but Atlanta has been very hateful for the most part to my people. And so I call it a nicety. It's a nice nasty. It's this layer, right, that you know is there. People come across as nice, like, you know, this Southern hospitality, this thing, but there's this layer there, right, that you can't penetrate. You know it's there. You know, and I would give a great example, the incident that happened in Charlottesville and just my interactions with white people, and their kind of reflection about that. I felt that, like, you know, they were disgusted, they were hurt by it. But then as I began to have like real conversations about what's brewing, what's the energy in Atlanta right now, in terms of healing and emotional self-care about Black people and what's persistent in terms of the huge disparities here, they can't connect that.
Right.
It was like, okay, don't you, you know, it's almost this insanity that I feel sometimes that I'm communicating. I'm like, you don't, like, the average Black person is only making what, 20-something thousand, you know, the median, right? 20-something thousand. Then you talk about white people, 70-something thousand. So what is the commentary on that disparity and being outraged that people in your own city are experiencing this? And that's also part of white supremacy and white nationalism. So, I see that we lost Jen again. I don't see her. Hopefully she'll chime back in quickly. Let me see here. Okay. There you go, Jen. Hey, you're back.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, I would say that the naming it is a particular challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say too, a lot of white people may not, they kind of want to step back in the conversations because they may feel that they are not as articulate.
Right.
But this is about your stories, and this is about naming it and understanding, and naming it and reckoning, like you said, with history. And that for Black people, we see you as a race. This is not an individual.
Yeah.
You know, this is as Ruth King in her book Mindful of Race talks about stars and constellations, that we're looking at the constellations as Black people. We're looking at the race of white people, and are they really truly about building the beloved community? Can we really trust you all in dismantling white supremacy as we try to fight for Black liberation? Because we feel that there's no post to this traumatic experience yet.
Yep.
So, but I think that articulation is like, I need you to say it so that we can learn and build from there. You know, and if white people, I guess, in the challenge of not just saying it from your individual and as a racial group perspective, if you're not doing it, then we can't build a transformational relationship. You really can't get to that white allyship.
Yep.
That you may intend to be. You have to be open. Yeah, and Stacey brought this up. She was like, white people don't seem to be willing to connect the dots.
Yes. Yes. And yes, exactly. And actually, I was about to say almost the same thing, which is that it's true. I actually see white people being unable to, or unwilling to connect the dots, right, is a better way to say it, as you said, Stacey. That's like an intergenerational pattern that white people have learned, is to not connect the dots. When we see like the racial wealth divide and we see Charlottesville, we literally, I think that's a like protection mechanism white people have learned to absolve ourselves for any responsibility, taking responsibility for what our group has done, which was to make up something called whiteness and make up a system of white supremacy. And so connecting the dots, I see as, for me, it's a daily practice and a daily anti-racist practice. And it's, whenever I see myself distancing myself from someone like, the white supremacist, the white nationalist in Charlottesville, I check myself and I think, no, it's not them over here and me over here. Like, I have not arrived. You may have given me a black card, Natasha, and I'm sitting with that compliment and I'm trying to really take it in and hold and honor that gift. And also, like, white supremacy is something that I see. We have to see ourselves as one group, even though it's a fake group, in order to take shared responsibility for ending it. And we have to have faith that there's a better future, actually, beyond this.
Yeah, and so I just want to do a time check. It's 12:47, but it looks like folks are still engaged. Are you still with me until maybe 1, Jen? Is that?
I can, sure.
Okay, all right, because I still see people still with us. And maybe there's probably a part 2 of this, maybe to unpack.
I know. I wonder what questions people might have too.
Yeah, I'm wondering. But I want to say the whiteness, the one thing in my reflection that I understand, and in no way am I saying this is Black people's responsibility or even my responsibility, is that the agreement around whiteness is that I recognize I don't know what Scottish culture is. I don't know what Irish is. I don't know what Italian. I don't know, because there was this agreement that I am white. But what does that mean? Like I can say, okay, some of the things, like my mother said, is definitely rooted in African tradition. She talked in African proverbs. Like I can completely see that. Like my mother was a walking African proverb, right? But that was passed down generationally, right? In our Blackness, right?
Right.
But in whiteness, like that's some healing work for white people, that you've agreed to not be Russian anymore. Like the cultural dances, the dress, whatever your tribe was, your shields, if you were Irish, whatever that looked like. I'm like, wow, what is that? Like, can you connect that the ways that we're showing up as a family is connected back to an Irish tradition or whatever or Norwegian, wherever you're from,
Yep.
tradition. And I think that's part of why the connecting the dots doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my theory. I haven't read enough research, but those are my thoughts and my own reflection. So which helps me to breathe and pause, and honestly, it protects me and be patient with white people. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is why this is happening, and I can, and it's time for me to leave the conversation. Like, this is something that you haven't dealt with, and there's nothing that I can help you with on that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I respect that. And I think, that is part of the work that I'm learning and wanting to do more of. And I've been researching this, and I've been reading the work of, people like Resmaa Menakem and Tara Hozumi, and some other folks who are talking about some of how white supremacy lives in white bodies and the specific healing work that white people need to do. But I recently read an article that said that the migration of European peoples out of Europe in the 1800s was the biggest human migration in history, and it's the least studied.
Oh,
that literally European people were oppressing each other in Europe, and then they basically transported those violent behaviors here, and then built the system of enslavement of Africans and eradication of indigenous people. Not complete eradication, obviously, but moving and stealing land. That those were actually behaviors that are rooted. That behavior of Europeans came from somewhere. It came from something unhealthy Europeans brought here, and it's a few hundred years old, and it doesn't need to.
Yeah, that's a good reflection question. Like, what is this need for supremacy?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
Right. Living within our white bodies, but as a generational, like, what is it? Is it DNA? What is it?
Yep.
This need for supremacy versus liberation, right? Because we all can work on liberation, and I mean, part of it, right, is that power hoarding versus power sharing. Is one of those normative things of, like, is a great reflection point for white folks of, like, so why is this need for exclusivity and supremacy, right? In the ways that we work together. Like, wow, so that's a good point. Wow. So
what's that about? Yeah,
what is that about? So
and I mean, I grew up with all those European cultures that are in my ancestry. Those had all been erased. So, I remember I had a class in college that was called like multicultural education or something, and we all had to talk about our culture. And I was like, I thought I didn't have a culture, which in some senses I didn't, because I didn't have an ethnic culture. But I also, that's part of how we're socialized as white people to think we don't see white culture. I thought that my culture was normal. So I didn't see that there were other cultures, and I didn't see whatever other cultures I became aware of, I didn't see them as equal, because I know somewhere in my subconscious I didn't, because there's a pervasive idea of white culture. And of course, there's many different cultures within white culture. There's lots of different cultures. Like mine, I actually do have a specific culture, that had to do with the religion I was raised in, the kind of neighborhood I was in, the kind of schools I went to, right? My class background, and then, but for white folks, it can be really hard to see that we actually are socialized into a culture, and that there are other ways of being.
And to your point, Jen, I want to, I'm looking at the time. We have about 7 minutes, and I wanted to see. I hear people, it's a lot of their comments, but wanted to know if there are any questions that folks want to put forward for the entire community to answer or comment on. So I'll just take a 30-second breath here, pause, if folks want to comment with any questions that they may have based on what we've said so far. Mhm. Okay. Well, one question I have, if I'm listening, is so Jen, you popped up, you said a lot of resources and I did as well. Maybe we can, I guess, as a after this, post some of the resources, like some of the people, the articles, the people that you said. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah. And so Stacy, thank you, Stacy. She said she posted a question. What is a realistic expectation of white people in this journey? Great question, Stacy. Yeah. Yeah, we both like, yeah.
Well, which white people, I guess.
Right. White people like Jen or like just general white people? Right?
She said, sure. I don't know what that means.
Right. Yes.
Well, I don't know. For me, like, for me, being realistic, I have to hold white people to a high level of expectation, and that's just for me because, like realistic, I don't know. We've just you know been had such a low bar for so many generations that to me, I oh, hold on, I'm seeing another question.
Yeah, this is about
But yeah, so realistic expectation. So what's a short answer to that? I think just a realistic expectation. Well, what I want to be realistic is reckoning with our history and acknowledging that white supremacy is a system that every white person, and really everyone, but every white person is socialized into. At least in this country, I can't speak to every part of the world. And it lives within us. So I think a realistic expectation for me is just like taking ownership of the decisions that I, as a white person, make every day, and knowing that many of those decisions, if they're not intentionally anti-racist, they're going to be reinforcing racism, even if I don't intend for that to be the case.
Yeah. So that last point of around intentional anti-racist. So that clarity for white people to know that, so one, just for me, like that was my grandmother, right? 1964, right? My mother was born in 57. So this is all fresh in this experiment, right? And we are still not there. There's still no post for us. But there needs to be some clarity on the reckoning of understanding the history that white people are open to really investigating and wondering about and reflecting about, right? And also doing and being open to be engaged in a journey. So when I look at what's the woman that does the blue-eyed, brown-eyed test?
Yeah,
I see her.
Well, I know there's been multiple iterations of it. I don't know the name.
Right, but she forces white people in a process. Basically, they're like, or they're surprised in a process. And I don't know necessarily there is any new clarity or understanding for them. But I would lift up Peggy McIntosh. Her work around unpacking white privilege and understanding is kind of foundational document for white people to be like, oh, and to reflect about. I think those are, and I have sent those to other white people, and some have responded back, and then others have actually engaged in a conversation like, oh, I never thought about that, right? Of just going to buy a pair of pantyhose, right? So I will say that that's part of it. I mean, I think it's important because Stacey, I know who you are, is the healing from racial distress is a real thing, an ongoing thing, because there's no post. But as one person put on here, I think it was Tiffany, she was like, protecting your energy is crucial in this environment, and taking it to a point and also letting that person know that it seems that you only want to go to this point. And I am uncomfortable moving this conversation. Jane Elliott, thank you, Kayla. I'm uncomfortable with moving this conversation because I feel that you're unwilling to go and really reflect and investigate to really dismantle white supremacy. Mm-hmm. That's on them.
Yep.
That's not you anymore. So I want to say that that's important. Mm-hmm. And that goes to Neat's question about how do we talk about the mirrored pains on both sides?
Yep.
Without losing focus on equity and liberation.
Yep.
I think some of it is like creating those environments and those community agreements about like what this is not about. Like, again, this is not the onus on Black people or the onus on white people about this. This is about sharing our stories rooted in dismantling this or fighting for liberation, whatever that point is. Mm-hmm. For people to openly share their stories. But a skillful facilitator like Jen and even you, Neith, who answered this question, or folks in our network, or even myself, as I'm learning more to deal with that, I think that community agreements and level setting and really bringing in ancestors in the room has been very helpful in my experience in grounding in that, but be very specific that this is the star that we're reaching for, is this equity and liberation. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, Jen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and this is a really good question. And I think it can be dangerous and it can be easy. Like, I don't even know how well I've done in this conversation, right? Trying to talk about how white supremacy damages white people and how we're less human than we could be if we could overcome white supremacy.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
Wow. While not making it about like, oh, poor me, or
exactly
the tears people, like,
and the tears, like that we have to then take care of you.
Right. So that's our work to do, and it should never, like, the healing work for white people can never, in my opinion, should never be outside of or separated from a context that is very real and honest and blunt about the pain that the pain and death that white supremacy is, and that white people are causing every day in communities of color. So how to hold, and for me, it's an internal journey too, like how to hold and how to love myself while I hate whiteness. How do I hold both of those things and become a better human and help other white people become better humans with eyes wide open? Like, there can't be any sugarcoating.
Right.
We can still love each other without sugarcoating, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Which is, honestly, it's so funny you said that. I remember right after the 2016 elections, and I was at the Facing Race conference. Mm-hmm. And I sat at a table, and I was the only Black woman. And then there was a white woman. There was 4 other white women at the table that was just, of course, devastated. And I was like, this is nothing new. I expected this. And I don't know why I said this. I said, leaning into the Black experience of understanding of how we continuously move and work within the constant pain, as you said, the pain and death that white supremacy. But I actually said, this is a good time to lean into a Black woman experience, to really hear from us.
Yep.
Because this one little thing for you is a constant connected thread for us.
Yep.
It has never ended. Mm-hmm. And so just like understanding, like, this is a real experience. Let's talk about Black women that you all could really learn from. you could really learn from.
Yeah.
And how we are continuously, especially Black women, are backbones of some of these movements. All of the movements. When I'm now thinking about like all of the kind of Black anti-apartheid movements here, as well as leadership and liberation, like, you'll find a Black woman. And so there is some leaning in and understanding that I think could be very beautiful with Neith's question about us talking about like, oh, wow, you know what I mean, of the networks and how they've done that. That goes full circle to your first sharing of Baldwin and Sales about this healing and emotional self-care work that white people should really be doing and loving each other. So yeah, that question actually came full circle. Thank you, Neith.
It did.
So thank you, Neith. Yes, I'm looking at the time is 1:05. I'm thinking we should have a part 2 of this. What do you think, Jen? This is sure.
Yeah, I'd love for folks to submit anything more they want to hear.
Yeah, so I'm going to close this out with one of the resources, because I've talked a lot about, we talked, really about stress. So I want to offer one resource that Community Build Ventures is offering. It's called #GOTF, Get Out the Fire. It is a interactive tool to learn how to beat burnout, move past feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and overwhelmed. And I will post in the comments the link to, oh, I apologize, my phone is ringing. The link to, hold on, let me mute myself for a second. Okay, so hopefully it stopped now. But I will share the Get Out the Fire link so people can sign up. So the cost for this, I believe, is no more than $25 for you to get the workbook. And it goes step by step of really reflecting on fight, flight, or freeze, but then understanding what stress is happening in your body and ways to transmute that stress so that you aren't honestly inviting disease in your body and your mind. And so I'll post the link to the resource. It comes with a workbook, and it comes with 3 breathing exercises that is connected to mindfulness work. And the workbook, again, it's different activities that that you can do to really acknowledge your stress and really move past it so that you aren't burnt out. And again, inviting disease. So we talk about what happens in your brain and your body as well. So I'll post that here via the comments. And then Jen and I let's think about some resources that we want to post with this video that we brought up. And so and then I'm seeing Neith part 2. So she said ancestors are calling for part 2. So we will have part 2. We will think about what that is.
Yeah, we'll consider the phone call the official the request.
Right. That was clearly that was a phone call from someone in the universe, right? So thank you so much, Jen. I've enjoyed this conversation and looking forward to part 2. Any last thoughts that you want to share?
Oh boy. Well, just thank you for this conversation. I feel like there's just so many more questions that everything we talked about raised for me. So I just want to say, this work is never ending. It's ongoing. And it brings me great joy to just be in this kind of real exploratory conversation.
Yeah. And I want to say thank you to you, Jen. But this is helping me in my own practice. And I've enjoyed this experience from the email to now and beyond. So just looking forward to that. And so to everyone that's been part of this conversation past hour, thank you so much for lifting up your thoughts and questions. Continue to comment here. This is a communal space that we can continue to talk. And so thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye, Natasha. Have a good afternoon.